Paper 2, Section B, OCR, looking at a memorable moment. I'm going to get you there, stay tuned. Yes, Schofield on Shakespeare.
Simili a degli eroi, abbiamo il cuore a strisce, portaci dove vuoi.
We're aiming for this, of course: mature, engaging tone, beautifully written, genuinely crafted.
There are so many different ways to approach this section of the exam. However, I am broadly in favour of a diluted tick box approach, i.e. ensuring that you weave in certain techniques within your response. In particular, I do think you need to think carefully about how you structure your response for effect. Anyway, have a read through my tips, which are about to appear on screen. Press pause now. Here's an exam question. Write about a memorable time you spent with an animal. How are you going to make this interesting? How are you going to avoid sickly, nauseating guff? Anyway, time to get planning. I'd recommend 10 minutes on this before writing your full response, which you'll be able to compare with mine. Press pause, please. Hopefully you've produced a cracker. However, before seeing my full response, I thought you might be interested in seeing the first sentence of every paragraph within this model answer. Consider and discuss how I create a certain tone and how the narrative may develop. Go on then, press pause now. Here's the full response. My heart lurched. Apprehension seized me by the throat, as it always does when I approach the man cave first thing in the morning. Anticipation bellowed in my ear holes as I peered around the corner. What would I see this morning? Let me tell you a little about our cat, Milo. She arrived in the summer of 2016 by the back door, literally. I was away in Madeira, supping coffee, feasting on €1 pasta nata and plunging into cold water. Woes and stresses of the previous term? Long forgotten. It was on the journey back from the airport that the bombshell news was delivered. We have a cat. It is difficult to sum up my emotions at this point, but I'll try. On the one hand, I felt incredulous. Surely my own family wouldn't try to bring a wretched moggy into our house behind my back without even a pretense of consulting. However, I also knew I needed to tread carefully. Outright, belligerent rage rarely achieves results in our household. Back to this particular morning. I turned the light on. Sofa number 1, discarded white, reassuring sag in middle, tawdry grey blanket covering, cleared. Sofa number 2, 3-man, deep, strange multicoloured patterning, also with tawdry grey blanket covering, cleared. But then I saw my chair, the IKEA Poang armchair, which permits just the right amount of gentle rocking whilst glued to Super Sunday. My sanctuary, my saviour, my pal! My heart lurched. It had happened again. There was the nauseating whiff of the familiar in the air. This is an interesting development, I resumed after a gulp. Keep calm, I told myself. When did this happen? And, if you don't mind me asking, was there a reason I wasn't asked? These things just happen, apparently. And what also happens fairly regularly is that Milo, our cat, our dear cat, will regularly see fit to vomit in the man cave. To give her credit, she's admirably democratic in her depositing. One morning it would be the poang, as it was this particular morning. Another morning, the discoloured white would have been treated. and on a different day the rainbow would have been honoured. Meow. Curled up on the floor was Milo. I stared at her. She stared at me. Mercutio versus Tybalt, Conor Benn versus Chris Eubank, the USSR versus the USA in the mid-20th century. Meow, she repeated. We maintained eye contact. Her green glassy eyes looked unblinkingly at me, with the jagged pool of dark fluid far away from her glossy, immaculate-looking fur. After all, cats keep themselves spotlessly clean. It's one of their many attributes. There are times in life when rationality gets thrown out of the bay window. There are times in life when we feel compelled to act decisively. There are times in life when anger stirs within us, beating loudly like an incessant drum. A few days later, a number of posters could be found in the vicinity, including one pinned to a large birch tree. The sky was an exposed deep blue. Wispy clouds drifted dreamily, oh so dreamily, across the horizon. The sun was an unadulterated yellow. Missing. My name is Milo. I went missing from my home in Winchester on the 15th of April. I'm very shy and enjoy being stroked. My owners are desperate to get me home. Please help. 07242 624 319.
Before we dissect this model response, a delightful interlude. Can you spot the glaring spelling errors within these 3 sentences on the screen? Press pause to get thinking.
I didn't pear around the corner with a juicy fruit. I peered, which has double E. Belligerent, meaning wishing to fight or argue, has a double L. Of course it does. Incessant, meaning never stopping, is INCESS. Some reflections on this response. Well, always try to begin your piece in an interesting way. One way you can do that is start in the middle of the action without boring, unnecessary preambles. Here, I create a sense of anticipation by revealing that I am feeling tense, but I don't initially explain why. Note the variation in sentence structures. There are some dramatic short sentences, such as my heart lurched and long forgotten. But there's also some longer, complex sentences, including the complex sentence which includes the tricolon of positive present participles, supping, feasting, and plunging. Note here, once again, I'm making the reader wait for something interesting. In the first paragraph on screen, I make reference to bombshell news, but I only reveal what this is within the subsequent paragraph. We have a cat. In this section, I'm aiming to include complex, conflicting emotions, one of the items within my list at the beginning of this video. I feel both incredulous, but I also recognise the importance of being cautious in my response to the arrival of this cat within my household. Try to avoid boring, chronological plodding in your pieces. Notice how I regularly switch between the present moment and the past history of how a cat came to live in our house. This helps build up tension as we're forced to wait even longer to find out why the narrator is so apprehensive as he enters his beloved man cave. I often talk about circular structures for both non-fiction writing and writing imaginatively and creatively. However, note here how I repeat the opening sentence of the passage halfway through the piece. My heart lurched. This makes sense as I'm bringing the reader back to the same moment. It had happened again. I still won't tell the reader exactly what it is yet, although it is clear that it is something unpleasant, something I do not want to see. There is a hint of what it is within the reference to nauseating whiff. Keep your readers waiting, build up, delay, Craft your pieces for effect. Note how I shift back to the previous narrative, i.e. when I'm being told about the arrival of the cat, immediately after hinting about something unpleasant. On this occasion, I don't feel the need to use a signposting phrase such as back to this particular morning, or in this case, back to that car journey. I leave it to the reader to work this out. Look at the range of punctuation in this paragraph. The dashes allow me to sarcastically emphasise my feelings about the cat, whilst the semicolons allow me to link the different areas of the man cave used by the cat for her vomit. Notice the use of speech marks and brackets. I'm using the full range of punctuation and thus showing my skill and control as a writer. I also use a tricolon of hyperbolic metaphors to draw attention to the mutual loathing between the narrator and the poor cat. However, is there a hint of over-the-top theatricality in at least the choice of the first two images? The question asks you to write about a memorable time you spent with an animal. I do therefore need to ensure that my piece isn't just about me building up and moaning about the cat. Some of the narrative must be about the two of us together. And so we just look at each other. Note my use of anaphora in the second paragraph. This helps me build up once again and create some momentum. Why the need for these generic statements about the nature of life, which suggests that the narrator is about to do something out of the ordinary, to do something significant and momentous? But I don't tell the reader what this is. I imply something rather sinister, rather than state it unsatisfactorily melodramatically. The cat has gone missing, but how in God's name has this come about? So I leave this to the reader's vivid imagination.
You'll be watching Schofield on Shakespeare. Good luck for your exams.